It was a humid summer afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia. The sun seemed to burn through everything: windows, concrete, even people's patience. The kind of afternoon that made iced tea feel like salvation and tempers short. At exactly 2:07 p.m., a tall man in an ironed navy blue suit stepped into a quiet downtown diner that hadn't changed much since the 70s. Its checkered floor, red leather booths, and yellowed blinds gave it a timeless, slightly tired charm. The man's name was Eric Langston. He was a corporate chemist for a major agricultural firm based out of Chicago, temporarily in Atlanta for a high-profile client meeting. He had a briefcase in one hand, a phone glued to the other, and he carried himself with a sharpness that suggested he measured everything in calculations, even lunch breaks. He had chosen this diner not for the food, but for its proximity to a small warehouse. His company had recently purchased. He'd just wrapped up a site visit and needed a quiet place to make notes. The diner was nearly empty, save for two older men playing dominoes by the window and a waitress who stood behind the counter wiping glasses. Her name was June Carter, the singer. But the waitress. She was in her early 40s, tall, graceful, and quiet. Her uniform was crisp, her afro neatly pinned back with a yellow scarf. June had worked at Rosie's Diner for 16 years. She'd seen every kind of customer walk through those doors, from construction workers to congressmen, and she remembered all of them. Eric took a booth in the corner, placed his briefcase beside him, and started scribbling in a leather notebook. He barely looked up when June approached with a menu. "What can I get you, sir?" she asked in a warm, practiced voice. He glanced at the menu like it was a distraction and replied, "I'll just have black coffee, maybe a slice of pie." "If it's fresh, always is," she replied with a smile, walking off. Minutes passed. Eric alternated between scribbling formulas and checking his phone. June returned with coffee and a plate with a generous slice of peach pie. "Thanks," he muttered without looking. June didn't walk away. Instead, she stood there for a second, studying him. Something about the notebook caught her eye: the symbols, the chemical notations, the numbers. "You in chemistry?" she asked softly. Eric looked up, surprised someone like her would recognize it. "Yes," he said cautiously. "Agricultural chemistry." June nodded slowly, then said something that made Eric's pen freeze midair. "That's the wrong formula." Stared at her. "Excuse me." June nodded toward the page. "Got your stabilizer ratio off? If you're making any kind of nitrogen-based solution with that, ... it's going to turn unstable. Maybe even dangerous." Eric closed the notebook like it was something illegal. "I'm sorry. How do you know what I'm working on?" June leaned in just a bit. "I don't, but I used to be a chemical technician." "Well, before life turned another way," Eric blinked. "You're saying you were a chemist?" She shrugged. "Not with a title, but I worked in a lab upstate for 9 years. Helped develop pesticide formulas back in the early 2000s. Got laid off. You can tell me to shut up if I'm wrong, but that formula on your page is unstable." There was silence between them. Then Eric slowly opened the notebook again. He traced the formula with his pen, rechecking the ratios. His heart skipped. She was right. He looked up, his confidence cracked. "How did you see that?" June gave a soft chuckle. "Sometimes when you work with chemicals long enough, you remember their moods like people. You can feel when something's off." Eric was both impressed and unsettled. "Thank you. I'll fix it." June nodded, gave him a fresh napkin, and returned to the counter. Eric couldn't focus after that. "Out." Her words kept echoing in his mind. That's the wrong formula. Because the thing was, he had been under pressure. His company, Agrivita, had been pushing him to finalize a new crop growth stimulant, something they planned to launch across Latin America. It was cheap, fast-acting, and supposedly better for the environment. But he'd been cutting corners. Not dangerously, he thought, just enough to meet deadlines. But if June, a waitress, had spotted the mistake in 10 seconds, what did that say about the formula he'd approved last week? The next morning, Eric called his lab team and told them to halt all sample shipments. He cited a need for further testing and personally flew back to Chicago. Wasn't a popular move. His supervisor was furious. Clients were annoyed. Investors smelled delays, but Eric didn't care. Something about that woman's quiet warning had spooked him. He went back to the formula from scratch, and when he simulated the conditions in the lab, what he found chilled him to the bone. The solution degraded under heat. Worse, it reacted violently with a common stabilizer that local farmers in Central America used regularly. Within 48 hours, the mixture would destabilize and turn acidic. It wouldn't just destroy crops, it could cause serious burns to workers or animals that came into contact with it. Eric sat in the lab, staring at the smoking beaker in the safety chamber. If June hadn't stopped him, he would have signed off on the final production batch this week. The fallout was massive. His company had to issue a formal internal recall of the test batches already sent to 3 sites. Legal teams scrambled to downplay the near miss. Some execs tried to pin the blame on Eric. But the evidence was clear. He had corrected the issue before any damage occurred. Still, whispers spread. Nearly poisoned half of Guatemala, someone joked during a company happy hour. Eric didn't laugh. But the worst part came a month later. A leaked memo from the executive board revealed that upper management had known the risks and had approved the formula anyway, betting that local farmers wouldn't notice. It was June's voice Eric heard again in his head. That's the wrong formula, sent in his resignation the next morning. But the story didn't end there. 3 months after walking away, Eric returned to Atlanta. Not for business, but to visit the diner. He walked in just past noon. The place was busier this time. June was there, refilling coffee for an elderly couple. She noticed him right away. "Well, look, who came back," she said with a half-dashed smile. Eric sat at the same booth. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" June joined him during her break. He told her everything. The lab mistake, the near disaster, the company's cover-up. She listened quietly, hands wrapped around her coffee mug. When he was done, he reached into his satchel and pulled out a manila folder. "I started a foundation," he said, "to support independent chemical safety reviews for agricultural projects in developing countries. Quiet work, behind the scenes, but it's real, and I want you on the board." June laughed me. "Pour coffee and write specials on a chalkboard." It shook his head. "You saved lives. You saw something no one else did, and you weren't even trying." She looked at him for a long time, her eyes thoughtful. Then she said, "Let me think on it." A month later, she sent him an email. Subject, "I'm in." Within a year, the foundation had grown. They reviewed over 40 agricultural formulas across 3 countries. A quiet force for good, catching mistakes before they reached the soil. Eric never forgot how close he'd come to disaster. And every time someone praised the foundation, he told the story of the black waitress in Atlanta who whispered the words that changed everything. Sometimes, the right formula isn't found in a lab, but in a moment of courage spoken softly over a cup of coffee,